Blum, a columnist from the Jerusalem Post, and Ido Aharoni, former Consul General of Israel in New York. Thank you both for being with us here. Ruthie, to begin, looking at the landscape now, just less than 5 months, really, from the last election, the deadlock that resulted from that, what outcome could we see this time that would be different than last time? I mean, what might
so
we
far, it doesn't look as though the outcome is going to be much different. The focus, the issue that was the focus of the 5 months ago is slightly shifted from yes, Netanyahu, no Netanyahu, to yes, religious state, yes, secular state. But actually, the numbers, if the polls are right, which they may not be, if the polls are right, we're going to be stuck in a similar situation.
Ido, if similar results emerge from this election, the president, Rivlin, has some powers to avert a third election. What do you think would be the likely scenario here?
Well, definitely, and I think that Ruthie is right in her assessment that the right of center bloc will probably emerge with more or less the same number of seats. The big game changer is Lieberman. Lieberman is determined to impose national unity government, which is secular, and in order for that to happen, a few things need to happen before. The first is that Netanyahu will receive the mandate to form a coalition and will fail. Then Gantz will receive the mandate because no one wants to go to a third election campaign. And then the pressure on Likud will be tremendous to let go of Netanyahu. And this is, I think, the scenario that Lieberman has in mind.
Does it all depend on the numbers? You know, Netanyahu stepping out at this point, it appears his personality is a block to that whole plan.
It only depends on the numbers if the numbers are way off in these polls. Because at the moment, if the numbers stay sort of the same, exactly what Ido said, that Lieberman will determine. Actually, it was Lieberman who determined it the last time as well. And that's why we had to go to elections again. The difference is that Gantz has said that he would agree to a national unity government as long as Netanyahu is not the head of Likud. Now, let's suppose, even if he, being a politician, changed his mind about that. Let's suppose. And let's suppose that Netanyahu changed his mind and they agreed somehow. Why would they need Lieberman? Then they would have a majority without Lieberman. So Lieberman is also playing a funny game here with his own future.
We haven't talked much, or really no one has, in the lead up to this election, different than April, about the corruption charges, about the potential scandals around the prime minister. Why has that taken a back seat in this campaign, seemingly, or how significant will that be?
I don't think so. I think that the real choice that the Israeli voter is facing is between a restricted Netanyahu as opposed to an unrestricted Netanyahu. This is really the big question on the table. I don't think that Gantz has the option of forming a narrow government. And so this is really the option. Do you want Netanyahu unrestricted, fortifying his position in order to save himself from his day in court? Or you want Netanyahu restricted, facing his day in court, and the repercussions can be disastrous for him?
Your thoughts, Ruthie?
I actually disagree that his corruption scandals are not an issue. It is true that for the audience abroad, they may be less prominent. In the Israeli press, it's being pounded morning, noon, and night. But here's what I think. The reason that the people supporting Likud, not just the diehard activists, but the others, someone like me, for example, they're looking at something else. First of all, the corruption scandals, even the way they appear to be at the moment, seem a little bogus, a little ridiculous. But even if you don't think they are, what you do know is that Iran is sitting on the northern border and the southern border. You just mentioned Iran taking over another ship in the Persian Gulf. Netanyahu, there has been nobody as good as Netanyahu at staving off the Iranian threat. And I think Israelis, who are used to a little corruption here and there from all sides of the spectrum, are a little more concerned with the future of their country in that respect.
Ido, you've had a career in the international arena here, representing Israel. All that international interplay here. Yes, now we see the banners around the country with President Trump, with President Modi, Putin. How significant is all that, is the international scene right now to the way Israelis are going to vote?
I think it's very significant. I think that Israelis see an unprecedented intimacy with the United States, with Russia, with China, with India, with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, with Nigeria, with Brazil. These are all major players in the international arena. However, there is a certain Netanyahu fatigue, if you may. People think he's been there for too long. I think that the younger generation within Likud is getting ready. They're positioning themselves. And I think they're waiting for the right opportunity to show him the door. This is my assessment.
Good question, Rudy. Do you feel the same looking at the Likud party? There's been some subtle, or maybe not at times not so subtle, hints that they're unhappy with Netanyahu at the leadership, but perhaps have not been in a position to really express that. Do you think that there could be, depending on how the votes fall, if it's a bit of a disappointing result for the Likud, do you think that'll be the default position for Likud?
Look, you don't need to have the disappointing results for that to be the case, as Ido said, which is absolutely right. There is grumbling within Likud, but naturally, you're talking about a political party, and politicians, no matter how loyal they are to Netanyahu, want their turn, okay? I mean, that's the nature of politics, first of all. Second of all, it is true that he has been prime minister for the last 10 years, and as we've seen in other countries like Canada and Germany, 10 years seems to be about the public's limit. But what is true, and this is Netanyahu's, I would say, one of his character flaws, is that he hasn't been cultivating a successor in his party. And that's a problem, because if and when it's time for him to leave, it's not really clear. Nobody sort of sees anyone at the moment in Likud who has that gravitas.
Perhaps he's made active steps to avoid that, a challenger from emerging. Thank you both for your insights here. Appreciate that, and we'll continue our coverage.